even just affection. If this thing is about love, then what lover would not write notes, would not
communicate their love,
their care and love and affection for you. So
with God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoe's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful ends for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more.
welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. Michael Thompson hanging out with S.J. Jennings, exploring the kingdom of God and exploring particularly this series. What is this, number 4 in the series? With the overview.
2, 3. It's 4.
Four.
With the overview.
With
this
the
is
overview,
number 4.
it's 4. Sorry to interrupt whatever you're doing over there.
I'm reading a pretty decent book I found.
Lounging over there. So exploring the kingdom, particularly in the area of hearing God, experiencing God, God communicating with us.
Hearing God's voice.
To us.
Yes.
Yeah, hearing His voice. And I think, I just want to expand that real quick on this opening segment just a little bit. That, we've talked about a few things already, but even as we get into this more today, I think what I want to preview this with is, hearing God's voice or sensing His direction, His nudge. I mean, not always are we talking about something audible.
Yeah.
In terms of how God speaks,
mm-hmm.
which I think the word speaking or the voice of God kind of narrows it down to this idea that He's talking. And I think this episode, I'm excited about it because how does He communicate? How are the ways that He speaks to us?
How's this work?
Yeah. How's it work even, kind of outside of that thought? And what does He use to speak? And I think hopefully we can clear up some things, particularly in regards to, walking intimately with God. We believe means hearing from God in a variety of ways. How about that?
Yeah.
And so that's what we want to explore more today on the Exploring More podcast. We will be right back.
Heart of a Warrior is definitely a place where I feel like men can come as they are, right? So inviting a man to come as they are and to find out that there's more for them, right? That God has more in store for them, and more in store in the sense of things that maybe they haven't yet known or uncovered, I think is why I would invite another man to Heart of a Warrior, to welcome them into a brotherhood where they can feel like they're not alone in a world where we often feel like we're the only ones going through something. So just that simple invite has the opportunity to change the course of another man's story drastically. So that's why I would invite a man to Heart of a Warrior.
Welcome back to the Exploring More podcast. Even during that break, we just acknowledged the reality that we're not going to cover everything. I mean, that would be silly. That that we could put a framework around this.
To think that we could.
That could confine this to these things.
Right.
I mean, if there's burning bushes,
yeah,
in the Old Testament, and then obviously in the New Testament, like we've said before, there's some game-changing things.
Yeah.
Jesus, the Messiah, Emmanuel, entering into the story changes things, changes the communication network.
I think given that one of God's many titles is creator of the universe, He's pretty creative when it comes to how He's burning bushes, fish that swallow you. I mean, all these things, right, are His intentions and His ways to communicate with you. So obviously we can't in a podcast cover every single way that could possibly happen.
Yeah.
Because A, we're not God, and B, there's not enough time.
And I think Caleb, what was the number, Caleb? How many passages in the?
That was like 2,500 or something.
Yeah, I was going to say 2,000 or 2,500. And so the other thing that I want to hit, SJ, that I found fascinating in just walking with God these last couple weeks, because typically we get time in between each podcast, and it's interesting, whatever we're podcasting about, especially with a series. I don't know if it's the AI in my phone or it's the Spirit of God in me and the Spirit of God working for me, but I find things. Things find me, and this was fascinating. This idea that when you get into the New Testament, particularly, there's this word. John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. When you hear that, what do you associate that with right away?
The printed word.
Right. It's fascinating.
But it's not really
it's
what
not
it's
printed.
about.
We are not canonized yet.
Right.
We have not got to that place in the story, in the narrative, in the evolution of things. And so I think as Christians, we need to, I just want to put a asterisk by this idea that when Peter and Paul and James and John are writing about, and they use this word. Word.
It's not a word printed on a piece of paper.
Maybe in the next podcast we can dive a little deeper into some of those scriptures and the context of that. But I think you summed it up well. The Bible is not written yet.
Right.
And so they could be talking about the Old Testament, the Torah, the Old Covenant,
the commandments.
But I believe it's not a stretch to begin to think differently, that this is not about the Bible. This is about Him and Him communicating and Him speaking. I think we said this before, Caleb. If we didn't, you can strike this from the record if we did. But I don't think we're second class. I don't think Jesus talks about the followers that are to come after His original disciples. We're called disciples. We're called sons. We are the apprentices. I don't think it makes sense to. He's not going to talk to us, with us, instruction, guidance, counsel, comfort, all those things that the Holy Spirit talks about in John 16,
Even
15,
if you
17.
consider yourself a servant to Jesus the Master, a master still tells his servant what he expects him to do.
Yeah.
There's still communication there. Now, we have progressed, we've said this many, many times, to where Jesus calls us friends. And in order to be friends with someone, you have to speak with them, right? You just have to.
By nature of the Father, capital F, being the Father, and us, His sons, Jesus the firstborn of many in Romans 8. I mean, it is something worth exploring in the kingdom. And I believe, like we've talked about, if there's things in the way of receiving from God instruction, counsel, comfort, guidance, even just affection. If this thing is about love, then what lover would not write notes, would not
communicate their love,
their care and love and affection for you. So, so anyway, that's just a little precursor to
and a bit of review
to get into this place. Is it for everyone? Yes. What's in the way? A lot of things can be in the way, even believing that God doesn't speak. So we're given one more push for He does. And then how does this work?
I think the place for us to go right off the bat with this would be on page 210 in King Me, chapter 13.
Those categories.
And chapter 13 is really about healing encounters. But we really believe experientially and intellectually that the healing encounter comes from the encounter and interaction with the one that can bring healing. That sounds like a circular argument,
and well said.
But it really, so if that's the case, if you are somehow disconnected or don't know how this works, and again, we're not trying to communicate an exhaustive list of all the ways that this can work, but generally speaking, this seems to be how it works in the book here you've outlined. Then if that's not happening, then it's going to be hard for you to feel connected intimately with God, to have an intimate healing encounter, because he's the one that does that. So again, a little bit of review, but how this works is really important, I think. And I think you did a great job in chapter 13, starting on page 210 in King Me, just talking about I'm going to stay kind of at this higher level because so many others, you say this in the book, so many others have gone before me that go into such a deep dive, Dallas Willard and others, about hearing God's voice, that it doesn't make sense for me to try to write about this over again beyond this, how this kind of works, kind of a context. So anything you want to add to that about when you wrote this in King Me? Or
I like what you said a minute ago about I'm going to tie service and friendship. I think what Jesus was saying there was, I no longer call you servants, I call you my friends, because, and then he says because.
Right.
A servant doesn't know what his master is up to. He just does what he's told. And I think for my life, I had pretty much relegated my Christian life journey to service.
Yeah, and there's a time and a place for that.
Versus an intimacy. I mean, I in a father-son relationship, father-daughter relationship, where and it isn't just king and his servants; it's king and his teammates.
Right.
So
because what he's up to,
I mean,
he's sharing his vision.
And so I think what he's mostly up to is looking for men and women whom he can entrust his power and authority, because they have experienced his love. So we're going to talk some more about that, but I think that's so helpful in getting into these different categories that we put in the book. Yeah. So swing away.
Yeah. No, I just I think starting with this, we've talked about this already. I just highlighted some parts of the book here in this section that we can talk about. In Genesis, he speaks creation into existence. So he's using his voice to speak everything into existence. So there is a voice there, right? The sheep know Jesus' voice, and that means there's a voice to be heard. Yeah. He speaks through the scriptures. Yeah, we know this, right? Yeah. We know this. The Bible, I like what you said here in the middle of page 211. The Bible is largely a collection of stories just like your story and just like mine. Stories of real people, not exceptional people, but ordinary folk with their relationship with God. So they're ordinary people who are put into extraordinary situations because they're having this interaction with God. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, and we know from the scriptures that in the Old Testament, under the Old Covenant, he sent angels. He sent messengers.
Right.
Even up until the incarnation, he sends Gabriel to Mary. And this is how communication worked. Now there's the voice of the Lord, the voice of the Lord, the voice of the Lord, within the prophets, but then there's these angels that show up. And bring, they bring the message from the Lord.
First thing they usually say is, "Don't be
afraid." It's okay,
right.
It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you.
I'm not going to kill you.
So, but I think that it's, again, this thing hinges on the shift. If the context becomes more clear in the New Testament of why Jesus came, healing, Isaiah 63. Isaiah 61, Luke 4, healing for the brokenhearted, sight for the blind. I mean, came to seek and save that which was lost. All of the context of this, I think, is really important, SJ, for then the evidence that's for this. If it's to make us sons and daughters, if it's to reclaim us and redeem us as his own, if it's to have intimate conversations or to have an intimate relationship. I remember for years in Campus Crusade, God loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life.
Right.
But he's not going to tell you.
Right. That seems cruel.
That just seems weird.
Yeah, I would say cruel.
So,
Right.
to, like we've said, I love Romans 8 for that reason, that it's his love that transforms us. It's something to be experienced, even felt, heard, enjoyed, and needed. That's why he made image bearers, was to love them and to invite them into a love that the Trinity experienced within their relationship.
Right.
So,
and in that taught us to love one another.
And there's the command, right?
Right.
There, let me sum it all up.
Yep.
Enjoy and love and be in love with God, and enjoy and love and be in love with each other. That's what you're made for. So it's the love of God that transforms us, and it transforms us into who we are, who we really are.
Yeah.
So receiving that is so critical, and that's a key to. You said something last night. It was so funny that in the YouVersion Bible app translations.
Oh, the y'all translation of the Bible.
Okay, I'm bringing this up for a reason right now. Caleb, hang with me. I'm bringing this up for a reason.
Yeah.
And what does he say?
Y'all go forth and be multiply, be fruitful and multiply. Y'all do it. Yeah, y'all do it. I just could not believe that there's a y'all version of the Bible.
So here's what I was thinking this morning about that, and why I'm bringing it up now is there's an accent to God's voice and God's way, and it's loving. If it's not loving, it's not him.
Right.
And yet we have been so subject to so many other voices. Let me just give them credit for just a minute. Accusation, guilt, fear, shame. They have a voice. They have a presence. They have an experience with them that is brutal.
Right.
So again, therefore, why wouldn't God be able to have a loving accent that is... It can be a soft voice in comparison sometimes to how loud.
Oh, there's no
the
doubt.
Jeers and the taunting, and even the sinister whispering that I know I've become subject to at times.
Yeah, I think there's a real truth to that, Michael, and it, whether or not you hear it, whether you hear an audible voice, but more often, and we'll go back to the book here in a second. It just depends on whether or not you're paying attention.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the jeers, the shouting, the judgment, somebody cuts you off. That's so-and-so. That's stupid SOB.
Some things don't need a lot of provoking,
And it's, I'm not saying it even comes out of your mouth, but it's in your head, and it's so loud. And I think there is a still small voice. Yeah. And if there's a still small voice, then in order to hear it, what do you have to be? You have to be still.
Yeah, I mean
many times.
I mean there's a whole other conversation and a great conversation about solitude.
Oh yeah.
Silence. These practices that seem to be, I think it's in like 1 Kings where the prophet, he's not in the fire. He's not in the. He's not in the these destructive, and I'm trying to remember the actual prophet, but it's the small voice, it's the quiet, it's the still small voice. So I agree that I was asked a question the other day, and I know this is jumping ahead a little bit, but how's your soul, man? I know last year was tough. How's your soul? And I felt the same way. It elicited that reaction in me. Just the same thing you just did. I don't know if Caleb can make sure he gets the camera on that in that moment. It was good to be asked.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And to even, what our friend Tom Benner says, go to the door of your heart and knock on it. Knock on the door of your
How's
heart.
Your heart?
How do I feel about that? And it made me slow down for just a few seconds.
Yep. Versus what can feel like a platitude or, trite, which is, how you doing, buddy?
Yeah.
Or how you doing? How's it going? That kind of thing.
And
you're just kind of like, I'm okay.
Yeah, who was asking matters too.
Oh, of course.
And I felt like it was a sincere invitation to be.
A great one.
Yeah, a little weary, not just the holidays, but a little weary, and then some thoughts and some other words started to come to mind.
As you.
Yeah, I thought I was kind of dialed in to the spiritual reality of my being. I'm not the greatest authority on that, but I know who is. Jesus, how am I? Hopeful, tired, excited. Another word that came to mind was needy. And they weren't, with a chest poker or finger.
Stop being so needy. It wasn't like it was just the season.
It was. I felt like I was standing really or sitting with Jesus, looking at my soul, and it's not bad. It's not good, but that's how I feel.
Yeah.
And I just needed 30 seconds of just a little bit of a gear down, be asked the question, be able to, just like you did, like, thanks for asking. Let me, So.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I love too, you just kind of, I feel, it wasn't like you blew through a red light or anything. I just feel like to pause for a second and think about what you said when you said a second ago, I'm not the greatest authority on the condition of my soul.
But I know who is.
And to go, Jesus, how am I? Because what are we trained to do? Like, I know myself better than anyone.
Yeah.
And we just operate that way. Yeah. I do anyway. Maybe nobody else, but I do. I immediately go to me when somebody asks me how I'm doing.
As the authority on me.
Yeah, that's right. But I love that. Yeah. I love that. That's a great little sidebar there. Okay, how does this work? Halfway through the episode, I really want to get to the brass tacks of what you wrote in the book. God speaks through an inner voice. And what you say is we're all learning how not to hear from God. What matters is your own relationship with the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. So, like you did with your friend who said, how's your soul? Go slow. Yeah. Right? Gear it down. If you're in high gear all the time, man, you are going to miss a ton.
Yeah.
It's good to get off the interstate once in a while, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm notorious for taking advantage of drive time and making a couple calls. But it's different when I'm sitting at my desk or or taking a walk even, and I'm talking. It's just different. The environment's different. The speed, the pace, what's being even asked of my subconscious as I'm trying to make that destination, which I can almost go autopilot. But my I think this point you're making, or that we're trying to make, is are you putting your heart and soul and mind in a position to hear?
Right.
And in doing so also to ask some questions. I think I don't know if we hit this well, but there is a supposition that you can ask questions.
Yeah.
And what questions are off limits? I don't know. I haven't found any.
Right. We just mentioned it. One of them. Jesus, how am I doing?
Yeah.
Help me understand.
Exactly.
Help me see. Yeah. Yeah, and it occurs to me, man, I'm trying to think of a time where I might have heard a story from a guy, or a part of my story where I was really full, really busy, loading a trailer, getting ready to go up and speak on stage, something like that, like in my notes, or just busy, where God spoke to me.
Wow. Yeah.
All of the times that I can recall, all of the stories that I would share were in moments of slowness.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not saying he can't say, like, I know
agree.
you have a story of when you were just about to go out on stage at a deepening weekend.
Being interrupted.
But that was an interruption.
Or disrupted is clearly within bounds of how God may want to, put his arm out before you, like, or put his arm on and go, whoa.
Even that is like, stop for a second.
Yeah.
An interruption is a stop.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So this idea of slowness and man, I get it. Our lives are full. Everyone listening, watching, I'm sure your calendars are just as full as ours are, if not more so. It's hard to find the time, but if you want that intimate relationship, if you want that intimate communication, you've got to position your heart in a place. And like you said, maybe it's, I've got an hour to drive. I'm not going to call anybody.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put some worship tunes on or something,
Yeah.
And go from there. But I like this. What matters is your relationship with the Holy Spirit. We're all asked and invited to ask, seek, and knock. And talk a little bit about this part too, man. Your imagination lies in the tension zone between two realities, between the flesh and the spirit. How is that relevant to hearing from God?
Yeah. I think for a long time, I really didn't even have, my imagination wasn't even a neutral zone. It was occupied by the enemy in many ways. So so when a spirit of fear, can kind of do its magic, and prompt my imagination then to not only first have the thought that, Robin's mad at me, and then where does that go? What does that require of me? Oh, I need to be funny and help her not be.
Or if I'm not, this is your imagination.
It's your imagination.
If I'm not, she's going to get worse and worse and that, and then she's going to kick me out. We're going to get divorced. I mean, you just go down that trail.
Yeah. Fast.
And it's your imagination.
And it's the I get it. It's the synapses. It's the mind, the tracks that you run on. And I think because we've expressed this many times, that communication network even inside can be hijacked through wounds, agreements and vows, and have an interpreter that's just not good.
Right.
And so that's part of this, is even seeing that at work is a critical skill and ability. Like, if you just accept every thought that kind of moves through
as reality,
right? You're a captive.
You're in trouble.
I don't know a guy that isn't at the mercy of all of those thoughts and how easily they're hijacked. But if you can actually start to observe them, that in a beautiful sense, that's actually you, the observer of, wait a minute, is that true? So I learned a long time ago, it was a great exercise, that if you want to know the origin of a thought, take it to its end.
That's right. Oh, man. I think Tozier said something about that. Anyway.
Somebody brilliant. Lewis, Tozier, Oswald Chambers.
I'm not suggesting.
It wasn't original with me.
And I'm not trying to call you out on that. That's not what I was doing. I was just trying to remember where that was from. But that's
for discernment. So we haven't even really touched a whole lot on discerning voices and discerning things, but that's where I would go with this. That's where I was going with your question, to touch on that. And that takes a minute. That takes
Yeah.
a little bit of time to just, no, I don't feel that. I mean, if temptation is a thought or a suggestion and it goes autopilot and you just kind of go down the river
Yep.
or over the falls.
Over the falls.
The enemy doesn't have a whole lot in the way.
Right.
But if you start calling time out and say, wait a minute,
Why is this coming to me right now?
why do I feel this
What
way?
is this going? Yeah.
All of that.
This feels familiar. Why is this coming against me again? Yeah. I like what you said here after go slow. Develop those discernment muscles you have.
Discernment's a beautiful thing.
I was listening to a story of a guy this morning who, when he was 13, was paralyzed. So it was some kind of an infection or something. But anyway, it's your muscles atrophy if you don't use them.
Right.
Is what it made me think of that. If you don't use the discernment muscles, they're atrophied.
Yeah.
And you can't move them. You can't.
Yeah.
They're not as strong as they should be if there's any strength there at all.
It's
so
really
it does take development.
It's really interesting that Solomon asked not for wisdom, but a wise and discerning heart.
Right.
We bring that up over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something about the heart and its ability or inability to discern.
Yeah.
And for there to be wisdom. And I think wisdom is earned over time. So is foolishness.
Mm-hmm.
You know. And then what we're talking about, this other category that's revelation. And when you get revelation from God about your life, about somebody else, and it's that practice of learning to trust that leading, that voice, that actually increases your ability to have wisdom,
Right.
and respond and react kindly,
Right.
and lovingly, and hopefully strongly.
Right.
through
In the context of developing the muscles too, it's like
that's exactly
you do a
what I'm
10
saying.
pound,
Yeah,
and then you can do 15, and then you can do 20, and then you
Yeah.
can do 50. But if you start with 50,
yeah,
you're not going to be able to do it. So
Yeah.
you've got to just do the development work and build them up over time.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. God speaks through the world around you. So we've told some stories about God speaking through an inner voice before, multiple stories. We've told that. What about a story about speaking through the world around you, speaking through his creation? What does that look like? And again, it's tied into the previous one where we're talking about being discerning and being observant, right? And being on this observation deck. So, but in the context of creation and things that you would interact with as a tangible thing in the world, what you got one you would share there?
Well, a couple real quick ideas, thoughts that I think that, I know Sherry is a sunriser.
Oh yeah.
Most people are lazier and are sunsetters, and yet there's beach people, there's mountain people, there's ocean people, there's lake people, and I want to say that those things that you love and those environments that you love, they're speaking, they're calling. There's something about your soul that has a temperament towards some of those things. Certain animals, and that's why people get a little silly with their spirit animal. Or well, I'm okay with that. If not in, I'm okay with that in the idea that if that's what moves you, if that's what you're attracted to, pay attention to that.
Right.
So I have a daughter that just butterflies is a way that God speaks and moves and shows his presence to her. I mean, it's not her Patronus for my Harry Potter. It's not, but I'm saying that there are there's dog people, there's cat people. There's just things that we, I think, disregard in many ways as just things that, those are your preferences and stuff. Well, I believe those can be part of a communication network where God can remind you, I see you, I love what I see, I'm with you. So when my daughter sees a butterfly, I'm not going to tell her, that's not God, that's just a butterfly.
Right.
back to what you said earlier, I think it's a beautiful thing for her. Mm-hmm. We had an experience. You've been out back with me and the dogs, and we've taken walks back there. Caleb
the
too.
backwoods.
So I just love it back there. It's a place where I have journaled and written and just taken many, many walks. But I've encountered wildlife back there. I've encountered, our
the hawk
Eden, this hawk that we named that somehow it had to have been hit. It could fly to, I don't know how far, but my dogs are like, yeah, well, they're doing, like, oh my gosh,
I remember we were
it's
like,
a hawk,
what is that?
And I brought you back to see it,
right.
and ended up taking this hawk to the,
it was Talon Rescue.
Yeah,
or
the rescue, the raptor
rescue.
Raptor rescue.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, bro, that whole thing became a spiritual. I don't know if you've ever seen it in the movies when something in the movies goes, like
that zoom in.
Yes, like that.
Yeah.
And I was caught up in something otherworldly, is what Lewis would call it. Mm-hmm. Otherworldly. Mm-hmm. Put that in the show notes. Otherworldly. This is the world that we're meant for.
Yeah.
And it was a powerful story of my life within the scenery of my life, in which I was profoundly touched by God.
Yeah.
In this rescue, it wasn't like Jesus saying, okay, I love when we play this game of this is not how it sounds, but we're going to say it anyway. Like, well, I rescued you.
Yeah.
But I fell in love with this hawk in a matter of
You called me on the way
minutes.
to Raptor Rescue. You were crying.
I'm crying.
Yeah.
And I want this hawk to be okay. I'm experiencing this thing with this creature.
Right.
And Jesus says, I know.
Yeah.
I know. That's how I feel about you. I know. Mm-hmm. My creatures. Lewis calls us the creatures.
Yeah.
In some of his writing. And I'm like, oh, then I'm like, I go from
really?
just boom,
Yeah,
oh my
dude.
gosh.
Yeah.
He loves me, that kind of, and all of that, was that all to arrange for me to receive that? I'm not going to bet against it.
No, man. No
but
way.
I got to participate in it.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I'll have to bring it in. Just a quick one that Sherry and I experienced together. I don't even remember what beach we were on, but it was somewhere warm. And so we were on this beach, and it was kind of a half moon kind of shaped beach. And at one end of the beach was a sign that said, don't go past this point. And I don't remember what it was for. It wasn't because there's like alligators over there or something. It was just the end of the property or whatever it was. And it said, beach ends here. Don't go any further. So I just walked right past the sign because that's kind of my feeling about authority, I guess you could say. Sherry, on the other hand, stopped at the sign and did not want me to go any further. Well, we kind of were playing with each other, and I was teasing her about, not
putting your toe across it.
Yeah, exactly, being the rule follower and all that. So I take 10 steps past the sign, and I look down and I go, oh my gosh, this is why I was supposed to go past the sign. She's like, what? Because she's not that far away. I look down, and in the sand is a stone shaped like a heart. And it was unmistakable. Like, it was, it wasn't like sort of shaped like a heart. It wasn't, well, maybe if you hold it up in the right light.
It was manufactured.
It looked like it was a souvenir you would buy.
Right, I know.
But it was made out of sandstone, and I picked it up and I said, look at how God loves me for breaking the rules. It was just a great time. Yeah, I'll bring the stone in. Yeah, but maybe for the next time. But it's really amazing how if you are this just like we were talking about for hearing an inner voice from God, which we've shared stories about. I'm sure our listeners have plenty of stories too. You've got to exercise those discernment muscles. Mm-hmm. open up your heart and your mind to the idea that God created your imagination. He created you as an imaginative person, as an imaginative being.
Yeah.
You know, he is one of the most imaginative, and if not the, obviously he's the most imaginative and creative.
And they go
right?
beautifully hand in hand. Imaginative and creative.
Look at, I've got this song that came into my mind, and you got to look it up on YouTube. Maybe I'll find it for him, and he can put a link. It's a song called "Creation Calls" by Brian Dirksen. And someone took that song and paired it with, you remember the Planet Earth series?
Yeah, beautiful.
All these different creatures and how they interact with their environments. And the song is, how could I say, this is one of the main verses, how could I say there is no God when all around creation calls? A singing bird, a mighty tree, the vast expanse of open sea. And it just goes through all of creation in the song. It's great. Yeah. You have to look it up.
Yeah. I mean, ground zero, as we wrap it up, ground zero is believing that he does.
Yeah.
Ground zero is believing that he does. And then I believe the next step is asking him to, and then buckle up.
And then paying attention.
That's right. Buckle up.
Yeah.
Buckle up, pay attention, and see how.
Yeah.
See how he will. See what. So that's a good. Let's close this one, and I think the next episode we're going to just share some more stories of ways in which we've encountered God's presence or His voice in different ways and different things. So, I think that. To lean into this could be one of the greatest decisions a believer, an image bearer, a Christ follower, an apprentice of Jesus makes. And I'm going to bet on God on this one. If you will consent to this idea that He's speaking, that He loves you, and that he has things He wants to communicate in a variety of ways. And it's not all instruction and service. It's delight.
It's care. It's compassion.
It's all of those things. So, So friends, allies, this is a official Exploring More challenge. Ask Him. Ask Him why you don't hear. Ask Him why. It's been hard. Ask Him what He wants to say. Ask Him. Put those question marks out there and buckle up. We'll see what happens. Hopefully you can share some stories with us. We'll be back on the Exploring More podcast in the next episode to share some more of the stories of how He has disrupted and interrupted and delighted in us. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Exploring More podcast.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.